Ya, mi nombre es Iván Orama, estoy como gerente del programa Construyendo Comunidades Seguras para el Ecuador. Un gusto conocerlos a todos. Los que ya conozco, un abrazo a todos. Gracias.
Thank you. Maddie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Pendergraft. I'm a program coordinator based out of our California office. I work across business development, proposals, kind of the full scale. Nice to meet you and so glad you're here.
Thank you. Sam?
Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Lynch. I'm a program assistant at Miyamoto, and I'm based in our DC office.
Thank you. And last but not least, Lola.
Hola, buenas tardes con todos. Soy Lola Jiménez, coordinadora del componente 3 del programa Construyendo Comunidades Seguras para el Ecuador. Un saludo a todos.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, without further ado, I think we're going to start off with Hortensia. And just a reminder to both the presenters to please speak slowly so that Victoria has a chance to translate. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Hortensia.
Hola, muchas gracias. Pleasure to be here and very happy to be part of this very important and always relevant topic for all of us that are international development, and it goes beyond that. Corey, qué sorpresa. I know Rebecca was going to be here, but not Corey. Very, very glad to see you again. And this is a bit of a segue in terms of who I am and what I've been doing. As the introduction said, I've been in the international development sector for a little bit over 20 years. Started with the Red Cross, the American Red Cross, and did international assignments in Latin America. Out of those 20 plus years, 10 of them have been in the field directly as an expatriate person implementing programs. 4 of those years were in Latin America, 3 years were in Indonesia, and 3.5 years in Afghanistan. So with a heavy heart, I'm gonna have to talk a little bit about Afghanistan because certainly a lot of learning experiences from there, and we all have been seeing the news in terms of what's happened to that country. Very, very unfortunate. So throughout the 20 plus years that I've been doing this, it's been in very different technical areas. You know, it went from disaster response and resilience, what I have done with the Red Cross in Latin America, and the 3 years were in Indonesia as part of the tsunami recovery efforts. So that was a lot of it. I went more into the resilience recovery phase, not so much the emergency phase of it. Outside of that, I've done sort of stability transition programming in very, as you could imagine, very complex in conflict and post-conflict environments. Also a little bit of WASH programming, health, trauma healing. So it goes very broadly as, you know, almost 10 years of my overall 20 plus experience have been from the US managing programs overseas. So with that little bit of introduction of who I am, and again, once again, thank you for the invitation for having me being part of this panel. I understand, and help me, Lucine, if I got this wrong, the questions are gonna be at the end, so I'm just gonna continue, but if you feel like you need to jump in and ask a question, I'm happy. I don't wanna overstep in terms of what the rules are, but I'm happy either way. Okay, so I was asked by you know, Roberto to speak a little bit about gender inclusion, gender equality in terms of what I've done, my own personal experience, and why this is important, right? And it goes, you know, beyond what the donor wants, right? Most of the donors ask for this in the proposals, but we should be looking at it as human development, right? And how the inclusion of gender, it's very, very important on everything we do, not only in international development. You know, we've been seeing that a lot of us that are those of us who are in the States, we've been hearing a lot about DEI and gender inclusion and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's always a very relevant topic. So I think why it's important is that we understand that gender doesn't mean women. You know, gender includes men as well. And I'm just going to give you a brief story or a brief anecdote of what I've done. When I first arrived in Afghanistan back in 2004, 2005, the first gender programming I was involved in was having conversations with men. There were no females in these workshops because we needed to understand the context, we needed to understand the culture, we needed to understand all of that and take baby steps to talk about this very delicate subject in that particular context. So again, you know, our entire gender programming really was just speaking with the men. So that seems to be a misconception that gender doesn't necessarily equal, you know, female or women. So, and how do we do it, right? I think the importance, we'll understand the importance of it. In terms of what we're trying to get to is it's gender equality. It would be great if we ever get to gender equity, but it's something that we have to still working towards. But so we just want, you know, everybody, and that goes to any other social inclusion of other vulnerable groups and whoever is at a disadvantage. So in the context of what we do in this industry, and I know Miyamoto has a branch, has a section that is the business part of it, you know, the engineers that build buildings, and this, in a sense, you know, it is important because there are laws, there's regulations in terms of how you're going to build a building. If you need to access a handicap ramp, how many are you going to need? What is the purpose of this building? So I think that it's also involved, but people may not think of it as inclusion, you know, social inclusion. They just think of it, these are the rules that we have to follow. For international development, and I heard somebody here from business development section, is that this is when a company or whoever's trying to put a program together is the time to start thinking about gender equality. It goes into your business proposal. There is certain, you know, there's laws. Every donor out there has a policy, has a strategy, and they will guide you as to what is their minimum they're looking for. And you in business development, you know, need to speak to it. How are you going to approach it? How are you going to address it? What are going to be your indicators? And what are going to be all these tools that you're going to be developing later on? But really, it starts on that, what we call in the business, the G-trip, the analysis to go out there and help you get your proposal together. Once you win the bid, right, it's making sure that that is part of everyday implementation, and it's not a check in the box, is not, I have to report on these numbers, is how is this intervention that I'm thinking, irrespectively of what that activity is, right? I work in programs in the south of Afghanistan, in governance, where, you know, we step away from carpet weaving or sewing. I mean, we got into how do we form a group of women that are part of the government, not the government, but the governance of it. This community assure us that, you know, how do we work with them to train them, to make them part of the decision making, not only the end result of it. We included them in that part of decision making. So So again, be very conscious of how you're going to include that component on every single activity you're trying to do. Relating it a little bit more about what DRR is, my experience with that was, of course, with the Red Cross. It always had a component of what back then was called preparedness that translates to resilience nowadays. And working with community members, most of them were females coming in the middle of the day to do community assessment of risks and vulnerabilities of their community and how they were going to mitigate those and what are the plans that we're going to put in place to do that. So there is a space in every activity you're going to propose or you're proposing or you're doing. There's going to be gaps. How do you complete those gaps? So that's sort of what I want to get to is very inclusive, and it has to be a purpose. It's not after the fact thing that you have to report on, or it's no longer a nice to have, it has to be part of it. And going with that is providing the resources to these vulnerable groups or disadvantaged groups, provide them with the tools they need. Could be training on doing damage assessment in your case, in the case of Miyamoto, for example, and doing all this, after an earthquake or a flood or whatever your interventions are, how do you include them? Also, teaching them to be good advocates for themselves, and this is communication skills like advocacy, how do I advocate for it? You teach them how to communicate, how to express themselves. You also teach them, a lot of the work I've done is in the entire project cycle. They're part of doing the assessment of their community, proposing small projects for their community, developing that project, teaching them about managing their own project, and also how do they monitor and evaluate the impact of that project. So it's the whole project cycle that you have to train them on to give them the tools that they need, to which we hope will be sustainable, minus Afghanistan, because everything just kind of, certain people called the Taliban came in and just like erased the whole thing. So capacity building is really, really important, working with this disadvantaged groups. I want to specifically highlight one case. Through my experience, like I mentioned, I've worked with the Red Cross, I've worked with the UN, specifically IOM, the Office for International Organization for Migration. And then I worked for consultancy firms, like Chemonics is one of them. So during the time I worked in Afghanistan, we had a female engineer back in 2005, which was fantastic. And how did that happen? You have to it goes with your recruitment, right? You have to accommodate for females to come in and be interviewed by another female in the room. They can be left alone with another man. So really understanding the context. Picking, it was very good qualified to go do the work. But in order for her to go do monitoring assignments in the field, she needed to have a chaperone, because that's the custom. That's what they do. And you're not there to change custom. You're there to facilitate, a female to do the same job that a male person could do. So we facilitated that, and it was part of our budget. The chaperone will go out there, do site visits with this person. She'll come and do her report. So again, being that that have that purpose to help, in this case, this female engineer to do the same thing that a male engineer will do. So that, to me, it's probably one of the best things that I could think of in terms of success, given the time, 2004, 2005 in Afghanistan. After that, working again in Afghanistan in the South and the Southeast, where was the more kinetic time at that time. And also making sure that we provided the security for us to interview females, for us to place them in a job where they were comfortable doing the job, whatever they needed, chaperone, extra security. A lot of times we do things that in the Western world we think it's not appropriate, like segregation, putting them in a different room than the males, but it's for their own comfort, and they will ask for that. Some females were perfectly happy being in a room with other male engineers. Others will prefer to be separate in another office. So again, being conscious to accommodate for that, provide a fair treatment to allow them to develop their skills and perform to the maximum that they can. I have tons of examples, so I'm going to stop here because we have another professional in this subject matter. I've been seeing it more from a management point of view, making sure those indicators are met, that the planning of the program it's thought through with that gender lens on it and other social inclusion. But we have another expert here, so I'll stop here and then I'll let her go on, and then happy to field any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hortensia, for sharing your experience and stories. I'm sure there will be questions, but as you said, let's pass it over to Dyanne for her presentation first. I believe she will be sharing her screen, and then we can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Lucian. Just 1 second to share the screen.
Sure. And I believe she will be speaking in, presenting in Spanish. So for the English speakers, please make sure that you select the English channel.
Could you please confirm me that you have the presentation? Yep, great, thank you. Just if you want, I can try to make it in English, and just in case there are some words I can do it in English, I will request for some help. First of all, I would like to share the experience of the Costa Rican Red Cross. Before we have all the questions you send me, I would like to share with you the experience we have. Because we have been working hard to develop actions to search for the social inclusion and gender equality, taking in consideration that we are talking about men and women who are in both sides, and volunteers and worker sides, and then also as beneficiaries of the humanitarian assistance that we provide. So it has been a long work for us in the Costa Rican Red Cross, because we have to consider both scenarios talking about gender. We are a humanitarian organization that we work in mobilizing the power of humanity. And power of humanity means a lot, because means a lot of different fields that we work. For example, in that picture that we have is a volcano, where we had to make some rescues a few months ago of some people that they get lost and then they have an accident there. To be honest, this presentation has been made by my colleagues in different spaces, regionally, national, and even outside of our borders. However, now, a few minutes before connecting with you, I was reflecting in how things have changed, because being the first woman of president of this national society that has 136 years old is probably the biggest challenge I can imagine, considering that we are talking about male-dominated sectors, as we were talking. In Costa Rica, we have the gender equality and equity policy strategy, and But into these documents, we have been working really hard to change some things in the national society, and probably we have been good job because some things have been changed. The Costa Rican Red Cross get the compromise to promote and guarantee the equity and equal rights between genders in our daily work, both internally and externally. And that for us is really important because we are trying to reduce these gaps, these gender gaps that we were talking with Hortensia before. And we are trying to do it strengthening the participation of women leaders in different structures of the Costa Rican Red Cross. And if we talk, for example, about COVID, about a pandemic, it means a lot because, as you know, we have the different gender roles. And during the pandemic has been also really hard because we are talking about some jobs that is really hard, social being from women, talking about rescue, talking about heavy tools, talking about mountain search, and also it has been traditionally for men, right? And right now we have like new generations trying to make the difference. These are just fun facts that we have. For example, the one in the left, we have the drivers of the ambulance. 97% of them are men in our national society, and only 2.88 are women. These are the paid drivers that we have all over the country, and if you see the huge difference, the gender gap is huge between both. Then we have the local managers. This is another example, which are the ones that coordinate the filials that we have in different parts of the country. And here we can see a huge difference. And if we make the comparison between drivers and local managers, it's huge because in other areas as managers, as management, we have more women participating, but then we're still having some other positions where we only have men. And there are only few women doing that job. This is another example. This picture means los despachos, which is the place where we receive the phone calls of help and we send the ambulance. Right now, we have a lot of women starting to be in these places in communication, but this is starting to be because in the past we didn't have that. The second thing I would like to share with you is that we have something called Globe Red. Globe Red is an initiative, a worldwide initiative that starts in Stockholm. In all the national societies, all the Red Cross from the world has been together working to have more work in gender and trying to close those gender gaps. And we are in 80 national societies, let's say 80 Red Cross in the world. And Costa Rican Red Cross is one of those from the beginning, and we are trying to make some changes even in the law of the organization, in the status of the national movement. For example, my colleagues, they were in Milan, in Italy, like in this one in the left, in the meeting with other women trying to figure out how to close that gaps, and then also in Canada, in Ottawa, and then in Stockholm. And with my colleagues from Costa Rican Red Cross that belongs to the Globe Network. And also one of those big challenge we had is the resolution of the International Conference in 2019 of the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies. And we were together, all the national societies together to make the difference in that resolution. And that's how we finally approved this resolution called Women and Leadership in Humanitarian Action of International Red Cross and Red Crescent Movement. And Costa Rican Red Cross was one of the first national society that promotes that because we believe strongly in that. And here in our country, we have been making some meetings with women, trying to figure out how do we feel, what do we think about, what do we think we can do better, what do we think we are not doing good. And we make the first national meeting of women from all the country Actually, this was before pandemia, actually. But with women from all the ages, because we thought it was necessary to have a space for reflection and analysis of the importance of the role that women play in the Costa Rican Red Cross. And it allowed us to improve our policies, our strategies, and other instruments that we have in the national society based on the experience and the recommendation of Red Cross women from all over the country and all over the structure. This is one of, of the pictures of that day. And for me, the most big lesson I have in that moment, we were in that moment making the change of the new uniform, because actually this picture has the old uniform and nowadays we have another one with other colors. And for me, the big lesson that I have there, they tell us, why did you choose that color of uniform without asking women how do we feel in that uniform? Because we have specific needs that we need to be that needs to be taken in count when selecting a uniform. Because as you can see here, our pants were blue and now our pants are gray, and they tell us that they need to feel comfortable and they need to feel safe. And even we were some women also taking the decision. We never made a consultation all over the country asking everybody how do they feel and how they will feel with the uniform. So that's one of the most important lesson we have in this, because we realized the importance in having the opinion of different peoples, but also having the woman in this space. That was that short presentation that we prepared for you. And as the other colleague that was before me, I'm ready to answer all the questions you want to make. Thank you, Lucen.
Thank you, Dyanne. Thank you so much. I'm opening it up then to anyone who has questions about their work or about our work, and any suggestions of how to integrate gender into our participation or project designs. Feel free to also type questions in the chat if you have any. I see one from Diana.
Yeah, hi, hello. I just wanted to make the question to any of you. I mean, I don't know how much you know about the work that we're doing, but at least in Costa Rica, we have to work a lot with institutions. I mean, with a high-level DR officials to make significant changes in terms of DR policies and policy instruments, generally speaking. What would be like the top 3 recommendations you would provide to reduce the gender gaps in these kind of scenarios, working with these kind of people in this specific field?
I don't know how we're going to answer, but I can start if you want. Thank you. It's a great question, actually. There are many ways to answer that question, because it's going to be depending on each scenario we have. Just to give you a few examples that we are using in Costa Rica, when we go outside to hire drivers of ambulance, in Spanish, we can say conductores, which is a male word. But if we say person drivers, I don't know how to say it in English for you to understand. I mean, including the word not woman, not men, just make it generic. All the women start to believe that they can do it. And they start believing that there is a space for them to do it also. It's not only for men. I don't know if I'm telling you exactly the thing. I mean, in Spanish, if you say conductores, it's just male. But if you say la persona conductora, like the person who drives, it includes men and women. So just something like that, so simple like that, feels everything includes and feels that I can do it. And they are talking to me also, not only they are talking to them. So in my opinion, talking about inclusive language is about talking about person, not talking about male or female. It's talking about person. And then the second thing I would like to remark is that we need to focus in the competence, not in if it's a woman or if it's a man. It's talking about competences and give the spaces to the people to be there related with their competences, not just because it's a woman and we need to fill the space to have more women in the picture. Because we are more than just a picture. And that would be like my first recommendation to that question.
Thank you.
In terms of, you know, policy, that if you want to change policy at a higher level, right? And what I found it's worked is, you know, sort of presented as what is the value of being inclusive, right? And the value of being inclusive, it affects everything, you know, economic development, preparedness, and just kind of show them where that is. And I'll give you a perfect example that I went through myself. When I started with the Red Cross, I was dealing at a level of sitting at an EOC, Emergency Response Center, right? Of a city where I'm the only female. And there's like police chief and fire chief and all the big dudes making the call, right? Making decisions. And then you come in with your data, with your confidence, and you part of the table, you sit at the table and kind of showing them that it's not a disadvantage being of, you know, a different gender. And just kind of showing them that they have a lot of value to offer, you know, that using that inclusive language and of just going in there and a lot of times you have to throw statistics, right? Like showing them the value of females, if you will, of gender equality. But working at a policy level in a male-dominated isn't easy. You know, nobody said it's going to be easy, but I think if you throw statistics, numbers, studies that other people have done, you know, another example, Honduran Red Cross, we brought in a team from the Mexican Red Cross, right? And we're giving this fantastic training on how to use the jaws of life. This is heavy equipment. The teacher was a woman. And everybody's expecting that the males were going to pick up this heavy equipment, expensive. No, a lady got in there and that switched the mentality very quickly. And so a lot of times we have to be more visual and kind of show that with numbers and pictures and experiences to be able to carve that, to open that door, right? What you need is to crack open that door and then you could just, I'm sorry to say it this way, but push your way through.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see a question from Miyamoto International. I'm not sure who's there. Oh, it's Corey. There we go.
Thanks. First of all, Hortensia, Dyanne, thank you so much. Very interesting discussion. I sympathize with Diana's comment. This is something that we've encountered a lot in our policy and planning programs, the prepare programs that we've implemented in the region for 6 years or so now, because you have a table and you have counterparts from the government primarily, but also from you know, academic institutions, universities, and professional associations. But oftentimes you have to work with the people that are at the table representing those institutions. And so you don't have a lot of say in how you, in selecting your counterparts in these kinds of instances. But I would say, you know, insofar as we as facilitators of a process and providers of technical assistance, capacity building support, insofar as we can steer the discussion a little bit to maybe open minds to the broader picture of gender equity and how a lot of the policies and plans in disaster risk management and earthquake preparedness that we're helping to develop or strengthen, that those have to benefit all of society, men, women, and everyone. So I think insofar as we can kind of steer that discussion and nudge people in the direction of a more holistic sort of view of development, that would probably be our best option. That said, I would just add that we have had great experiences incorporating women into sort of leadership positions in our programs. I'm thinking about the community-focused training in Ecuador that Ivan and his team have been implementing for a couple of years now. Really cutting edge techniques at mobilizing communities, ensuring that there's broad women and other more disadvantaged groups involved in the discussion from the beginning. And so that's been really exemplary, I think, the work that we've done in Ecuador, and something that we can all learn from. And then the other example that comes to mind is in Colombia. I don't think Jaime's on the call now, but last year we had a couple of success stories about women comandantes in the urban search and rescue teams there. And this is all, this was something that happened organically over time. These women elevated within their respective search and rescue teams. But that's something that we can focus on through our media and our communications efforts, and just generally promoting with our partners and with other stakeholders in the program. So there's no silver bullet, but I think there are a number of things that we can do to gradually change perspectives and the dialogue over time. So didn't have a question. I think what Dyanne expressed is something that's on all of our minds, and it's constantly a challenge that we encounter in our policy focused programs. But I think that it's good to just reinforce some of these messages that Hortensia and Dyanne have brought to the table here. So thanks.
Thank you, Corey. Courtney, did you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess kind of dovetailing off of that, I think some of the struggles that I've seen for us in terms of, I think it was in your talk, Hortensia, you mentioned, at the business development part, and trying to think creatively about how we can approach having an impact through our programs on better outcomes for gender, better gender equality at different levels. And it seems more, I guess, organic to think about from a community level or when you're working with people. But I think some of the struggles that we've been having are more, at least for me, more along how to creatively think about working with these technical working groups at policy level, these stakeholders, to get that tied in at the policy level. And I know language is a big part of it, but I was just wondering if either of you could speak a little bit to any examples you've seen in policy itself for how we could work with something like that, if that makes sense.
I lost my mic, unmute, there we go. At the policy level, I guess I would relate it more to a case in Afghanistan, and where now I feel funny because all of that just went up in smoke, but at the time it was a success, and it's a lot of times it's taking us out of the norm, if you will, right? You arrive to Afghanistan and everybody's like, yeah, we're going to do gender programming. Everybody's going to be trained on doing carpet weaving. Well, they've been doing that for years. They don't need to be trained on carpet weaving anymore. They know how to do that. So we took it a step back, and that program was a governance program. It was a stabilization program, which is, talk about male dominated, right? And within that community was at that little bit of policy level. And we started from the grassroots, right? And talking to the women, and they couldn't be part of this male district assemblies. So we created a women council. So it's a women advising council, and they will meet on their own and they will talk to the head person of the assembly to make their voices heard. But at the same time, we tie them at the province level, the Ministry of Women's Affairs, and we tied it all the way back to the federal level, right? Where we took a look at what is the country, what is their policy, what is, and oftentimes it's in their development goals, right? You find it there because they have to include it there. So you start with studying what have they committed to, and what do they think as a country that is delivering these policies that they're going to do in terms of gender inclusion. And you start tying it all the way up there. And once this group of women at a community level find themselves with the voice heard at the federal level, then at the federal level, they start pushing for more policy change. It's a long process. In 3 years, 4 years, we created 9 councils, which was a huge success, but it was the whole cohesive thing. It was very complementary, and we tied it all the way up to the federal level. And it gave the Department of Women's Affairs at the federal level with the information they needed to make policy change. So, that's probably very difficult for you to relate to what you do, but that's a clear example that I could point out that we were successful.
In addition, I would like to add something, if you allow me. I think that through policies, we can draw the strategic lines on the organization in gender issues. And through this, we can commit ourselves in all levels to work together in the goal of gender equality, which will directly impact in our beneficiaries with more organic attention, because we will have like a 360 vision with that will allow us to go further and to more to the people. In our organization, we make some changes in our status to be sure that we were going to promote the gender equality and the gender parity, and also the alternancy. I mean that we have women, men, women, men, women, men, not only men's and then women's in level positions. We were like making some changes in our status, that is like the highest regulation that we have in our organization. And we make also in the side some changes, creating specific policies and strategies in the planification level to be executed in different levels, in national, regional, and local level, with specific activities that will impact in the organization, talking inside and then outside, related with the beneficiaries we have.
Thank you both. I think honestly, both of your stories and points give me a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
Roberto?
Hi, Lucy. Thank you, Hortensia and Dyanne.
Roberto, we're not able to hear you.
1, 2, 3, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Dyanne and Hortensia, for your presentation. That we are just focusing on male and female during your experience, including other groups in this that you have developed around the world. Thank you.
I'm not sure if we were able to hear the whole question, Roberto. You cut in and out a bit. Did you catch the question? No, okay. Could you try to repeat it for us? No, can't hear you.
Or maybe typing it.
Yeah, type in the chat maybe.
One more. Can you hear me there?
Yes, it's cutting in and out, so we get every few words.
All right, in the chat box.
Thank you. Nicole, do you have a question you want to ask while Roberto's typing?
While Roberto's typing, we've
Sure,
come
go ahead.
across, while we do community work, a phenomenon where when we're doing preparation work, the women show up. When we're doing response work, the men show up. And it's very curious, despite lobbying for the men to come out to prepare, the men feel that they are prepared and they can handle anything. And then when it comes to the response, the women tend to step back or be overwhelmed by the men who show up for the response training. Any suggestions?
Isn't that the truth, right? Even in the U.S., and it's a very sensitive issue, right? It really depends on your local context because you don't want to offend people. But I think respectfully, having sometimes the facilitator, or when you're going to run these meetings, have somebody else to spot you and say, can you kindly interfere when you see this in a very respectful manner? Because one facilitator is difficult to pay attention to everything and just kind of interfere and say, like, does anybody else have a suggestion? Or I would like to hear from so-and-so, and kind of try to elevate the female voice, right? I personally do not like the champions, when the men are going to champion something for the women. I'll prefer more when they're an ally, and you do need to look at having male allies that are going to amplify your voice, that are going to step up for you, that, that they're going to, there's a lot of things they could do within their own groups, being a male, to elevate and help the women, call them out for a comment that it's not locker talk, or something that was said inappropriate. But when you're dealing with the community, right, I will recommend that you have a co-facilitator and somebody else just paying attention to that and very respectfully to say, great comment, but I'd like to hear from, so-and-so, and open that door for that female to feel comfortable and say, well, this is what I think. Because if we don't do that, they're not going to want to raise their hands, right? They're going to be quiet and shy in the corner, even though they have very valuable things to say. And if your co-facilitator could be a male that will help you amplify those voices, I think it may work for you. That's what I would do.
And I would like to add something else. I agree that the perception of risk is going to be different from a man into a woman. As you say, in some cases, men feel safer or have some parameters of the society that force them to look safer. But the secret is to involve them both in the planning of the strategies, in preparation, in response, in prevention, also to have the holistic vision that allowed us to reach farther and make it better.
Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize that it's the end of the hour, so if some folks have to drop off, thank you for joining us. But if we have time for Roberto's last question, I have it here in the chat. He said, we have been focusing on males and females. Could you please share your experiences of including other groups in DRR activities in the field?
Yes, for example, I'm going to start this one. For example, with disabilities, people with disabilities, people indigenous, for example, in our case in Costa Rica, we just have from the whole population, just 1% of people is indigenous. And the knowledge that they have is totally different from us. Because, for example, when we have to go to the mountain to make search and rescue, they are the one that go in the first line and give us all the information about the climate, about the weather, about the rain, about the river and everything. So it's talking about social inclusion. It's not only gender, it's not only women and men. It's talking about different perspective that we have in the society. Disabilities is also because, for example, we have volunteers that has physical disabilities and they are like serving in the place they feel safe to serve. I mean, for example, we are not having somebody wheelchair in the ambulance because it's not that place, but they are in the radio, for example. They answer the phone, they send the ambulance, and they make they help us making other tasks. So I think we have to have a holistic vision, trying to include everybody and trying to include all the vision that different person has inside the organization, but then also to our beneficiaries outside.
And the only thing I will add to that, in terms of DIR, right, it will be youth. Youth it's a huge group of the population that it's very, particularly in DRR, that they're leaders of the community as well. They're really keen into helping out. I think for DRR youth, it's a very important group that could be included as part of those activities.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you. We're reaching the end of it, but I just want to express our gratitude to Dyanne and Hortensia for being here and presenting on their work and answering our questions. We have a lot of work to do to integrate gender into our projects and work, but we are so thankful for your insights. And thank you very much. Does anyone else opening up for any last thoughts? But otherwise, thank you so much also to the Miyamoto staff for being here as well.
Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity, and have a great evening, day, whatever you are. Take care,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you also.
So much.